Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas DeMarco. I'm here giving a presentation for Kinesiology 580 Advanced Sports Psychology. And the topic that we're going to discuss today is to continue or not after injury, an athlete's decision. So what we're going to talk about, skipped ahead a little too far, basically is what are the psychological aspects that are of concern when an athlete gets injured and is forced to retire as a result. Then are there any ways to mitigate these concerns? Are there any ways that potentially we can help these athletes when they get injured to maybe not pursue retirement? And then we're also going to look at some of the gaps in the literature and discuss some future topic discussions. So to start off, when an athlete comes to the end of their career, there's basically two categories that the researchers have identified: non-athletic reasons for career termination, and then athletic career termination. So athletic would be your things like injury. Non-athletic, though, are a big list of them. And so Erpic et al. Did a study where they looked at what are the non-athletic reasons for retirement. And this is really important when it deals with the psychological aspects of career termination. And so you can see here, there are some positive ones, and then there's also some negative ones. So like graduation is a big one, especially for collegiate sports, birth of a child, priority shift, right? And then there's also some negative ones, unfortunately, like death of a brother or sister or parents. That sometimes forces people into giving up their career. Potentially, maybe they have to take care of somebody. And so there are negative and positive ways that an athlete may decide to retire that's not related to the sport in and of itself. However, then we have athletic type of career termination. And there's actually not a ton of statistical data on career termination because of injury. There are a few studies here and there, but they're kind of small studies. We can see there's one that was done among Polish players, and 30% of the female football, soccer players did say that they had to quit because of an injury. There's another one in Finland. But overall, there's not a huge amount of data out there when it looks at directly injury being the main cause for career termination. So what are some of the psychological outcomes that are related to injury? A big one is identity. So identity is described here by Lally in 2007 as being defined as a multi-dimensional view of oneself that is both enduring and dynamic. One self-image or self-schemata is composed of numerous dimensions whose status in our identity hierarchy is fairly stable, yet also influenced by social and environmental factors. That's a lot of words there. And basically what they're doing is they're saying, how do you view yourself in relation to your sport? There's a lot of different things there. It is partly enduring in that it sticks with you a long time, but then it's also somewhat dynamic and it changes as you progress throughout your sport. How you view yourself as an athlete. And this is a very big theme amongst a lot of the research, that athletes, especially at the professional collegiate level, tend to identify themselves as an athlete. I am an NFL football player. I am a soccer player. I am a basketball player. If you were to ask them what they are, that part of their identity is highly related to sport. And so then what is that impact when an athlete gets injured and they can no longer perform in their sport, whether it's for a lifetime or it's for a season or a couple weeks? Typically what they see is that athletes have a really low self-esteem when that hit to their identity happens. They have issues with anger. They tend to lash out at their significant others, at coaches, at other teammates. They suffer a lot of anxiety and depression. And if an athlete, in those few studies that we did see, if they have to end their career suddenly because of injury, they typically have difficulty in post-sports career life. They have a hard time finding a job. They have a hard time with relationships. Some of them experience divorce, drug abuse, substance abuse, alcoholism. And so that big hit to identity as an athlete is really problematic for an athlete who got injured. They also seem to suffer a lot of pressure. They feel like they need to fulfill their goals. They got injured, and if they haven't done everything that they set out to, that brings on another type of pressure and stress to them. They feel a lot of times that the coaches need them to return, that they're letting their teammates down. And there's also this pressure that they're looking and they're saying, hey, listen, that guy out there that's going to replace me, he's younger and he costs less. So I really need to get the ball on and I need to get back to playing. And so that adds to that stress and anxiety. Finances is one of the main concerns for a lot of players. When they get injured, they typically lose their income and they're scared about taking care of their family. And so financial stress is a huge weight for these athletes. Whoops. And then the social aspect to it. Other players feel like maybe you're not pulling your weight. They feel like they're not close with their teammates anymore. They're not out there practicing. They're not in the huddles. They're not joking with their athlete or their friends. And a lot of times they're just watching from the sidelines. And so they're not really feeling connected anymore. And all of this adds to that really big psychological component with depression, anxiety, and feeling like they're not a part of the team. When we compare that, however, to the athletes who retire on their own accord, what we see is that they're able to separate themselves from their identity. As they approach the end of their career, they're like, I'm no longer really that football player. That was me in the past. Now I am a fill in the blank family man. I'm a businesswoman. I am what I am. And so what that does is it makes their transition out of sport into the real world, quote unquote, real world, a lot easier. Typically, they're also planning for their financial success. If they know that the retirement's coming down the line, they're setting things up. They're setting up bank accounts. They're starting new businesses. They're looking for jobs. And so that they don't have that financial stress that the athlete who suddenly gets injured once had. This is also really highly correlated with higher education. It seems like the athletes who have higher termination in their education, so bachelor's degrees, master's, PhDs, the higher education that they have seems to correlate highly with satisfaction and ease in transition. And that's probably because they know that they have something to fall back on rather than the athlete who just got picked up right out of high school and is now looking at an injury saying, oh my God, I don't even have an education. How am I going to get a job? I've done nothing but this sport. So what are then some of the tools that we can use to help athletes? We can really harp on, hey, you guys do have a social network. You have met a lot of people, you've traveled, you've met other teams. A lot of people are in your group to help you out through this injury. We can have these hard conversations of saying, hey, listen, this sport may not be forever. It's probably really hard to talk to Rex Jones, who just got signed, right? And like first round draft pick to say, hey, buddy, I know that you just got picked up for the NFL, but it may not be forever. What are you doing right now, even though you just signed a huge contract, to prepare yourself for later in life? We can continue to encourage higher education. Hey, Rex Jones, I know you just got picked up from the NFL, but is there any way that you can start working on some master's levels classes online? Because who knows if this football thing is going to last. A lot of NFL players only make it 1 or 2 years. So what are you doing to set yourself up for success afterwards? And then furthermore, we can develop hardiness and coping strategies. We'll talk about that here in a second, and encourage environments where components of the self-determination theory thrive. So hardiness is then it's defined as the ability to take stress and in turn create an opportunity to grow and develop it. And Salim et al. Found that the athletes who had a higher level of hardiness, a higher level of that, like, hey, this happened to me, but I'm going to look at this from a perspective of, yeah, I'm injured, but maybe now I can work on some of my form. Hey, I'm injured, but I can study the playbook. Hey, I'm injured, but now I can watch game film and I can develop myself that way. Those athletes who had that sort of mental attitude, they were the ones who bounced back a lot easier. They were also the ones that transitioned more effectively into other paths of their lives. So using sports psychologists, using coaches to try and develop those skills would be very, very helpful to the athletes. Self-determination theory is a theory that describes how motivated people fulfill their needs, and it's dependent on competence, which is the idea that you have an ability and you believe in yourself. Autonomy, so that the decision that you're making is an informed one and it wasn't coerced by anyone else. And then relatedness is that feeling of connectedness, having a social integration. Podlog et al. Suggested that if we could create environments around these athletes that try and foster these competence, autonomy, and relatedness, this may help these athletes bounce back from injury. And that makes sense, right? We want to make sure that these athletes are coming up with a plan that they believe in that's going to help them in their road to success, from their road from recovery from injury. If they feel like they've got social support within the team, within coaches, the staff, their family, if everyone's on board, potentially we can make better decisions, and we just don't retire when a career, like when an injury happens, even if it's really bad. And even if they have to end their career, what are the steps that now as a team we can make to make sure that you are successful in the next part of your life? So then where does this lead us from there for future research topics? Obviously, we need to get more research on career termination and injury, but a specific part that I would be really passionate about is to see what happens in recreational athletes. There's a girl here that I work with, Lily. That's when she first started at 12 years old. You can see that she's got some valgus in her knee, just standing there. She was a twig, no athletic, ability really. And now she's 17. She's turning 18 in a couple months. That's her on the right, competing on the national stage after 6 years of me working with her and our team. And so while she's not a professional athlete, she's not getting paid for this. She's been doing this every single day for 6 years. What happens if she gets injured? I would expect a lot of the same things that happen to the professional athlete. Maybe she's worried that she's not able to go to school because she tore an ACL. Maybe she's not worried that she's going to be able to work at her part-time job. So financial stress. She's not going to be able to train. So she's not feeling connected to the team. I would imagine that a lot of that happens. However, we don't have any real research on recreational athletes. Another example is jujitsu. I just joined a jujitsu gym, and I think a lot of people are doing a lot of different health related activities now that more and more research is coming out about being healthy, COVID-19. And so there are guys in there that are purple belts that have been training for 10, 12 years, and they don't really compete, but they love doing it. What happens to them when they get injured? I think that would be a really interesting way to take some of the future research. So that's all that I have for today. Here's a list of all of my references, which I will provide. Of course, I really appreciate you taking the time to look at this presentation with me. If you have any other questions or would like to discuss anything further, you can always reach me at my email, nicholas.demarco@csu.fullerton.edu. And once again, I thank you for coming to my presentation.